I'm Katie Wilson and welcome to A News. Here are the headlines. Myanmar quake death toll hits 1,000 as international aid starts to arrive. Estimates say the number of fatalities could exceed 10,000. A Russian drone attack on the Ukrainian city of Dnipro has killed at least 4 people. Vance accuses Denmark of underinvesting in Greenland during his controversial visit to the island. Foreign rescue teams have begun arriving in Myanmar following a devastating earthquake that has claimed the lives of more than 1,000 people. The 7.7 magnitude quake has caused widespread destruction and crippled critical infrastructure in a country already struggling with an ongoing civil war. The death toll continues to rise and international assistance is now arriving to aid in the search for survivors.
Rescue efforts in Myanmar have intensified after the deadly earthquake that struck on Friday, leaving over 1,000 people dead, according to the latest figures released by the military government. This marks a sharp increase from the initial state media reports, which placed the death toll at 144. In neighbouring Thailand, at least 9 people lost their lives. The powerful quake shook buildings in the capital, Bangkok, causing the collapse of a skyscraper under construction. Authorities report that 30 individuals are trapped under the debris, with 49 more missing. The US Geological Service's predictive modelling estimates that the death toll in Myanmar could exceed 10,000, with losses potentially surpassing the country's annual economic output. According to the ruling military junta, the earthquake has severely damaged roads, bridges and buildings across Myanmar. In a rare move, the country's top general has appealed for international assistance. In a statement on state media, the junta reported that search and rescue operations are currently being carried out in the affected areas. A Chinese rescue team has already arrived in Yangon, Myanmar's commercial capital, which lies hundreds of kilometres from the worst-hit cities of Mandalay and Naypyidaw. Parts of a major 1,000-bed hospital in Naypyidaw have sustained significant damage. International aid is now pouring into Myanmar. Russia, India, Malaysia and Singapore have dispatched relief supplies and emergency personnel to assist in the crisis. South Korea has pledged an initial $2 million in humanitarian aid through international organisations. The United States, despite its strained relationship with Myanmar's military leadership and existing sanctions against junta officials, has confirmed that it will provide some assistance. The earthquake's impact has been widespread, affecting areas from the central plains of Mandalay to the rugged hills of Shan, where the junta does not maintain full control. In Mandalay, Myanmar's second-largest city, desperate rescue workers and residents are working tirelessly to retrieve people trapped under collapsed buildings. However, limited access to heavy machinery is making it difficult to clear the debris efficiently. As the international community responds, the focus remains on saving lives and rebuilding essential infrastructure in the wake of this catastrophic disaster.
A Russian drone attack on the Ukrainian city of Dnipro has killed at least 4 people and injured 19 others. The mass strike caused a large fire at a hotel and restaurant complex, as well as damage to nearby buildings. Among the injured is a 27-year-old pregnant woman who sustained a stab laceration wound. 2 of the injured, a man and a woman, both in their 60s, are in a serious condition. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has confirmed that Kyiv has officially received a new draft agreement from the United States on a critical minerals deal. According to Zelensky, this new document significantly differs from previous proposals discussed in bilateral meetings.
Kyiv has officially received a new draft agreement from the United States on a critical minerals deal. Speaking at a press briefing, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky emphasized that the new deal will be thoroughly reviewed and compared with earlier versions.
It's an entirely different document. There are many things that were not discussed, and also some things that, let's say, the parties had already rejected. I don't want to raise a wave. I really want us to get a specific review by lawyers at the highest level.
The Ukrainian leader also took a firm stance against the idea of US military aid being provided as a loan, reinforcing that such assistance is crucial for Ukraine's ongoing defence efforts. Additionally, Zelensky announced that Ukraine is preparing to host a high-level meeting with military representatives from several nations that are considering sending contingents to Ukraine. France, the United Kingdom and Ukraine have confirmed their participation in these closed-door discussions. Ukrainian leader also revealed that the United States intends to consult with Saudi Arabia, Ankara and European nations about establishing international monitoring mechanisms in relation to the ongoing war.
We were informed that the American side will conduct inner consultations. Then they will conduct consultations with Saudi Arabia, Turkey and some European countries regarding their readiness to conduct the monitoring of the ceasefire. I'm not aware of the results of these talks. The American partners have not informed us about it yet, but they voiced it out, and we said that the ceasefire will not work without monitoring.
On the topic of potential negotiations with Moscow, Zelensky made it clear that Ukraine remains open to dialogue with Russian representatives, provided they present a real and viable plan to end the war. However, he categorically ruled out any negotiations with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Russia's president has floated the idea of a UN-sponsored administration leading Ukraine into elections before peace negotiations. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said Ukraine has legitimate government that must be respected.
Obviously, that must be.
A new wave of US airstrikes has struck multiple locations across Houthi-controlled provinces in northwestern Yemen. According to Houthi-run media, the strikes have resulted in casualties and significant damage. It's reported that 14 strikes targeted the outskirts of Sada city, a known stronghold for the Houthi movement. The airstrikes reportedly killed 1 civilian and injured 4 others. In a broader offensive, 36 airstrikes struck key locations, including the capital, Sana'a. The Houthi media has described these attacks as US aggression, a term the group frequently uses when referring to American military actions against its positions. The United Nations voiced serious concerns on Friday over renewed violence along the Blue Line. It's in response to rocket attacks from southern Lebanon and retaliatory Israeli airstrikes, marking the first strikes on Beirut since the ceasefire agreement came into effect. Smoke was seen in southern Lebanon on Friday as Israel bombarded Hezbollah positions. The military says the strike was in response to a rocket launch, though Hezbollah denies any role. Earlier, Israel warned it would target a Hezbollah-affiliated building in Beirut's southern suburbs, ordering residents to evacuate. The UN called on all parties to exercise maximum restraint and refrain from further escalatory activities which endanger civilians. And for more on this, joining us live from Jerusalem is Mohammed Al-Qassim, TRT World's Jerusalem correspondent. Thanks a lot for joining us. So the Israeli military says the strike targeted a Hezbollah drone storage in Beirut's southern suburbs. On the other hand, Lebanese president described the strike as a continuation of Israel's violations of the agreement attained in November last year. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, this is going to happen until there is actually a clear ceasefire deal that spells out that Israel needs to pull out from Lebanese territory. If we know Israel was supposed to fully pull out from Lebanese territory 3 months after or a few months after it signed the ceasefire deal back in the end of November. It didn't. It asked for an extension. Then an extension was given until February the 18th. But Israel remains in southern Lebanon. It occupies 5 different positions in the Lebanese territory. And its excuse is that the Lebanese army has not fully deployed in southern Lebanon, and also that Hezbollah has not fully pulled out from also the southern part of Lebanon, all the way north of from the Israeli borders until the Litani River. That's some 40 kilometers. And until there is something clear about that, and until the U.S. actually takes a much better stance against Israel, because the Trump administration came in clearly in support of Israel following these latest attacks, saying that Israel must protect its citizens and its interests. So Israel, according to its Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and its Defense Minister, who warned again that if any projectile or any rocket attacks against Israeli communities along the border will be answered by attacking the Lebanese capital, Beirut. And this is what Israel calls a new equation, that Kiryat Shmone, the largest community along the border, will, if it's targeted, then the Israeli army or military will target the southern suburb of the capital, Beirut. And that's definitely going to continue this escalation. We have seen violation after violation of the ceasefire agreement, and it's really hanging by a thread at this point. But there are some factions that operate in southern Lebanon, most likely with the approval of Hezbollah, even though Hezbollah's influence has diminished somewhat following the war with Israel. But they have been firing rockets at Israel. And it doesn't matter who's behind these attacks. Israel always holds Hezbollah responsible and holds the Lebanese government responsible. And that's why they've been targeting Hezbollah targets across Lebanon. It's not exclusive to southern Lebanon. We've seen it last week target eastern Lebanon, northern Lebanon, and even closer to the Syrian-Lebanese border.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your insight there. That's really interesting. That was Mohammed Al-Qasim, TRT World Jerusalem correspondent. And now, joining us live from Beirut in Lebanon to discuss the same subject is Nadeem Shahadi, a political analyst and economist. So, what is your reading of this situation regarding the latest escalation?
Hello. Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me on your show. Well, I mean, life is continuing almost normally in Lebanon while this is going, because this is now more interpreted as a incident rather than a full-blown war. So there was agreement in a ceasefire agreement that ended months of a full-blown war, which was between the end of October and until November. So that was considered as we were in a state of war. Since then, since the ceasefire agreement, it seems that there are both sides are playing games, the Israelis and Hezbollah, and the Lebanese government is caught in the middle. Because the agreement was with the Lebanese government, and the Lebanese government has to fulfill part of it. Hezbollah is still sending signs that it's not disarming, it's sending contradictory signs. On the one hand, it says that it's cooperating with the agreement. On the other hand, there are rockets that are sent across from the border to Israel. Hezbollah, of course, denies that it's them, but it couldn't be anybody other than either them or someone that they have allowed to do that. So it's a communication game between Israel and we are.
And what's your sense on where things are heading in terms of what this means for the ceasefire agreement?
Well, the stakes are very high for the Lebanese government and the Lebanese state, because unless there is an implementation of the ceasefire agreement, which includes the disarming of Hezbollah in the whole country, not just south of the Litani, and the disarming of Palestinian groups in camps, unless this happens, then the the sort of reform process, the reconstruction, the aid, the support from the international community will all be put on hold as well. So it's all depending on that. If Lebanon is seen as still under the grip of Hezbollah, and there's no sense in doing any reconstruction. It is going to be destroyed again afterwards.
Thank you very much for your analysis there. That was Nadeem Shahadi, political analyst and economist. Now, US Vice President JD Vance accused Denmark on Friday of not doing a good job of keeping Greenland safe. He suggested the United States would better protect the semi-autonomous Danish territory, which President Donald Trump is pressing to take over. During a visit to the US military base there, Vance said the US has no immediate plans to expand its military presence on the ground, but will invest in resources, including additional naval ships.
Senior Trump administration officials are in Greenland on Friday, visiting an Arctic U.S. Space Force base on the northwest coast of the semi-autonomous strategic island. The delegation is led by Vice President J.D. Vance, accompanied by his wife Usha, and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz and Energy Secretary Chris Wright. The trip comes as President Donald Trump has intensified calls for the United States to control Greenland, a move that has Greenland's former colonial ruler Denmark increasingly anxious. The Trump team delegation will meet with the U.S. soldiers on the far-flung military base, but they will not head into any major cities in Greenland. President Trump recently said that, quote, "we'll go as far as we have to go to bring Greenland under American control." So clearly, the Trump administration very much determined to gain control of that island. Vice President Vance has also been vocal about what he says is the mistreatment of the Greenlandic people by Denmark, and he has highlighted the disrepair of the island's infrastructure due to what he views to be Denmark's neglect. Vice President Vance's press secretary recently told reporters that, quote, "the security of Greenland is critical in ensuring the security of the rest of the world." Greenland, which has a population of about 60,000 people, has had its own government and parliament since 1979, but it still relies on Denmark for economic and military support. The Trump administration clearly is determined, however, to change that and bring Greenland under the American sphere of influence. Ube Shabander, A News.
Tech billionaire Elon Musk says he will finish most of the work to cut $1 trillion in federal spending when his tenure ends at the end of May. However, budget experts question whether his plan is realistic without touching Social Security.
Tech billionaire Elon Musk says he's confident his Department of Government Efficiency could find $1 trillion in savings in the coming weeks. It will slim the current total federal spending levels of about $7 trillion down to $6 trillion. The leader of the Doge made the comment on Fox News. His role as a special government employee is expected to end in May, and he says his team is on course to reach their target.
Our goal is to reduce the deficit by $1 trillion. From a nominal deficit of $2 trillion to try to cut the deficit in half to $1 trillion, or looked at it in total federal spending to drop the federal spending from $7 trillion to $6 trillion. Well, I think we will have accomplished most of the work required to reduce the deficit by $1 trillion within that time frame.
The chief executive of Tesla has led a fierce campaign to reduce government spending, including significant cuts in US aid global funding. Experts argue that reaching his target without entitlement cuts is unlikely. However, Musk claims the cost-cutting effort will not affect Social Security.
No, in fact, what we're doing will help their benefits. Legitimate people, as a result of the work of Doge, will receive more Social Security, not less. I want to emphasize that. As a result of the work of Doge, legitimate recipients of Social Security will receive more money, not less money.
Despite facing criticism for mass terminations to save costs, Musk insists there have not been as many layoffs compared to the overall federal workforce. His teams say around 75,000 workers accepted buyouts out of a total of more than 3 million, according to reports.
Haitians took to the streets of Port-au-Prince on Thursday, demanding action against rising gang violence.
In Port-au-Prince, Haiti, protests have erupted as residents demand government action against escalating gang violence. Armed groups now control approximately 85% of the metropolitan area, home to a third of Haiti's population. In the past month alone, over 60,000 people have been displaced due to violent attacks in neighborhoods such as Carrefour Feuille and Bas-Peu de Choses. The United Nations reports that from July to February, more than 4,200 individuals were killed, underscoring the severity of the crisis. Haiti's national police force, comprising about 9,000 officers, struggles to maintain order for a population exceeding 11 million. The deteriorating security situation has led to international concern, with the US Department of State advising against travel to Haiti due to risks of kidnapping, crime, and civil unrest. As the humanitarian crisis deepens, the international community faces mounting pressure to support Haiti in restoring stability and safeguarding its citizens.
In South Sudan, a new wave of violence is driving many people to seek refuge in internally displaced camps. And now the United Nations is warning that the country is on the edge of a catastrophic return to war, unless steps are taken to de-escalate the situation.
The streets of Juba in South Sudan tell a story of struggle. The recent violence centres in the Upper Nile state, where clashes between government troops and an ethnic militia have escalated. The fighting intensified after President Salva Kiir dismissed its governor, accusing him of allying with his rival First Vice President Riek Machar. And now thousands of people are displaced and living in overcrowded camps. Victoria Kojang is a tea vendor and she fears for her safety.
I strongly oppose war. I want to protect myself and my family. I pray day and night. I don't want war.
As a citizen, the ongoing problems in South Sudan only harm us. We are tired of years of war, and the people of South Sudan have shed a lot of blood.
The United Nations warns that South Sudan stands on the edge of renewed war as rising ethnic tensions fuel instability. Yasmin Souka is chair of the Human Rights Commission in South Sudan and says leaders must act now.
South Sudan is standing at the crossroads, and its leadership can decide, to honor the revitalized peace agreement and, in fact, to build on the gains of the last 7 years. But they can also, if they choose not to do so, to plunge South Sudan back into another conflict.
The African Union and the Intergovernmental Authority on Development have been criticised for their slow response. The UN has also raised concerns about an increase in hate speech, warning that if tensions continue to rise, South Sudan could once again plunge into large-scale conflict.
Independence leaders and human rights advocates gathered in Baku to address ongoing political and humanitarian concerns in former and current colonies. Participants called for urgent international action to support affected communities.
Representatives of independence movements from French and Dutch territories gathered in Baku ahead of the international conference, Colonialism, Erasure of National Religious Identity. Organised by the Baku Initiative Group, the event brought together experts on decolonisation, reparations and human rights. Prominent independence figures engaged with journalists during the press conference. Family members of Kanak political prisoners who have been illegally detained by the French government also attended the event.
After the natural disaster in Mayotte, there was no plan. France should have been prepared for this. Instead of helping the area affected by the cyclone, France came and set up a military base there. The priority should have been to help the suffering population.
The families highlighted inhumane detention conditions, violations of legal rights, and restricted access to legal defence. Representatives also condemned Paris's inaction in response to natural disasters. They emphasised that the French government seeks to silence anyone who asks for help.
France is arresting independent supporters on drug charges, but this is completely unfounded. The arrests are politically motivated. They are being imprisoned and tortured because they want independence. The families of the prisoners are also suffering.
The discussion also shed light on ongoing human rights violations in New Caledonia's fight for independence and reinforced the need for international intervention.
A new railway corridor has been inaugurated in Afghanistan, marking a significant step forward for regional connectivity. The corridor is anticipated to greatly enhance Afghanistan's economy by offering a direct and efficient trade route to European markets via Iran. Tamim Bahis has more from Kabul in Afghanistan.
The long-awaited Afghanistan-Iran-Europe railway corridor has officially been launched, marking a major milestone in regional trade and connectivity, the Embassy of Iran in Kabul announced. In a ceremony attended by the Iranian Consul General and the Governor of Herat, the first shipment of Afghan exports was dispatched from Herat, making its way through Iran to Turkey and Europe. Developed in cooperation with Iran, this new corridor is expected to significantly boost Afghanistan's economy by providing a direct, efficient trade route to European markets. Experts say the expansion of Afghanistan's railway network holds enormous strategic importance. It positions the country as a key connector between Central Asia, South Asia, the Middle East, and Europe, turning Afghanistan into a vital bridge for regional commerce. With continued investment and regional cooperation, the corridor could play a pivotal role in reshaping Afghanistan's economic landscape. This is Tamim Bahis in Kabul for A News.
We return now to our top story in the devastating earthquake which struck Myanmar and Thailand. Foreign rescue teams have begun arriving in Myanmar as the death toll already exceeds 1,000. The 7.7 magnitude quake has caused widespread destruction and crippled critical infrastructure in a country already struggling with an ongoing civil war. Laura Westbrook reports from Bangkok.
Here in Bangkok, a building that was under construction when that earthquake happened collapsed, and authorities here are using excavators, drones and search and rescue dogs to try to extricate those who remain trapped beneath the rubble. Officials have visited the site and said they haven't given up hope and they will be using all resources available. Authorities say they've also received around 2,000 reports of high-rise buildings that might have been damaged by the earthquake. Engineers have been sent out to inspect for cracks. And in neighbouring Myanmar, the situation is much, much worse. The death toll is rising. Roads, bridges and buildings are all damaged. Hospitals are overwhelmed, and there are reports of people digging for survivors with their bare hands. International aid is starting to arrive, with a team from China arriving into the country. But getting information from Myanmar is difficult, with internet access remaining restricted. Myanmar has been embroiled in an armed conflict since the military junta seized power in a 2021 coup that ousted the former democratically elected government. The junta made a rare international appeal for aid, and some aid agencies are mobilizing, including the Red Cross. It says that there is an urgent need for safe access to water and housing, and the next 24 to 48 hours are critical. Laura Westbrook for A News, Bangkok.
Well, that's all we have for now. Thank you for tuning in and keep watching A News.